Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to go over a tier list. It's actually going to be about the Drukhari units. I had a couple requests for it, so I figured we'd go ahead and sit down and we'd walk through this. This is going to be a fun one. I had a good time making it, so I'm real excited to share it with you. Before we get in, I just wanted to hit you guys up. If you saw the post, I've got some new merch up in the store. There's a really cool Warhammer flag, glass water bottle, and a couple of shirts. You can see some demos right there. We're gonna have some links in the comments and probably in the description as well. It'll take you straight to that, so check it out, enjoy it. Thank you. Real quick before we begin, I want to say this is all ranked and based on how I play. I do recognize that I have a fairly unique and very distinct play style. So you may look at these and you may be like, hey, this guy's crazy. I feel differently. And that's really okay. You know, I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who likes to play in the fight phase a lot. So my ranking is probably going to be a little bit different than yours because a lot of people tend to prefer the shooting phase over the fight phase. And there's just some things that are going to be better to other people simply because they play differently as well. There's going to be a few units I think we can all agree on, but for the most part, a lot of it's fairly subjective. And the other thing is this video is grading units within the context of our index. I'm not comparing them to similar units in other armies. I know I've said things like, oh, I don't understand why Hellions are this much, but Vanguard veterans are this much. And while that's a fair comparison and complaint, for the purposes of this video, I'm just trying to keep them within the confines of units inside the index and how useful they are when compared to other units in the index. When I'm looking at these units, the things that I'm going to be looking at are do they have a purpose and a defined role? Is it overshadowed by other units with similar roles? Is the unit lethal? Can it punch above its weight? Can it work into a variety of targets? Is it flexible in how it can be implemented? Does it have durability? Can it tank objectives, stand up to counter assaults, etc.? And then utility, does it score well? Is there a lot of mobility, or does it have different things that allow it to have multiple purposes? Or is it just a one-trick pony? So these are kind of all of the different things that I'm looking at when I'm ranking these units, just so you understand where I'm coming from, and we'll discuss each one a little bit as we go. Without further ado, let's start with everybody's favorite, the bottom feeding F tier, and that is actually the Razor Wing Jet Fighter. And that's the only thing I really felt deserved to be an F tier, and honestly, a lot of that comes from my feelings towards aircraft. I just feel like unless they have hover, most of the time they're not very good right now in this edition. And the Razor Wing is no exception. It doesn't really bring much to the table that you can't get anywhere else. It is 2 Dark Lances, Razor Wing missiles, Twin Splinter Rifle, bladed wings. So 2 Dark Lances, we already know what those do. The Razor Wing missiles are weird. They have 3 different profiles. You get a D6 at Strength 6, 1, 2, D6 plus 3 at Anti-Infantry 2 plus and Blast, and then you get D6 shots at 7, 1, 1. You get to choose one of those profiles, and they're generally very underwhelming. You have effectively 3 different anti-infantry profiles, and then your other option, or your not your other option, your other guns are Dark Lances. I can get a Ravager, and it gives me 3 Dark Lances, and it costs less points. And it re-rolls its own hit rolls of 1 most of the time anyway. So it's just one of those where, all in all, it doesn't do anything no other unit does. It is +1 to hit against units that don't fly. And again, by and large, it's not great. There's no reason to take it. The Void Raven Bomber is arguably just better at what it does. The Ravager is better at what it does. It is T8 with a 4-up save, a 6-up invuln, and 10 wounds, so it's effectively a Raider profile that you cannot hide. Don't waste your points on the Razor Wing, is my opinion, and that's why it's sitting in F tier. So now we're going to jump over to D tier, and there's not a lot in D tier, actually. I think the bulk of our army sits in C and B, again, grading within this army. And the 2 units that are in D tier are going to be Witches and Grotesques. And I know that sounds funny, coming from me because I'm like, yeah, witches, witches, witches. Let's play witches. I love witches. But the fact of the matter is that without a character in the squad, they don't do anything. They don't give you anything that you can't get from other units. The only thing that they have going for them is that they are really cheap right now. And when I say really cheap right now, they're not even really cheap. They're still 9 points a model, which arguably for what they do is still a little too much, but at 9 points a model, they're definitely a lot more palatable than they were before when they were like 110, 120, whatever it was. They do have a 4-up invuln in combat, so that can help them kind of withstand that clapback when you charge things if you don't kill it. It just depends on what you charge or get charged by. But outside of that, they don't do much. You get them into the right targets and they'll do some damage, but you really need the character for them to be a useful unit. The other D tier unit we have here is Grotesques. And Grotesques are interesting because I feel like Grotesques are a unit that could hover anywhere from D, C, or B. And I know that's a really wide array of places it could be. But the reason I say that is because they're not too far off from C tier as it is. The points are what keep them down. At 35 points a model, they're just overpriced for what you get out of them. They can be exceptionally durable, especially if you bring a big unit of them so they can tank an objective. But with OC1, they are T5, but they just have the 6-up invuln. They are 4 wounds with a 5-up feel no pain. So like I said, you can sit them on an objective and they will just like, that is theirs. They will hold it unless somebody dedicates something into it or you just have really bad dice. But by and large, the only thing that makes them really good is access to the -1 to wound strat. Outside of that, like I said, at 35 points a model, it's just too much. Now, if they drop maybe 5 points a model, if they go down to 30, I see them jumping to C tier, possibly B tier, because they do hit relatively hard with 4 attacks at strength 5, neg 1, 2 damage. So their melee is solid, and they can all take liquefiers and get the melee now. And the liquefiers are okay. They're just D6 neg 1 flamers, so there's nothing wrong with them. But not having access to any kind of advance and interact, no advance and shoot because liquefiers aren't assault, no advance and charge because they're not witch cult, means they're just moving 7 inches every turn. And like I said, by and large, they're too expensive for what you get out of them. So that's why they're at D tier. But you could make a strong case for them to sit at maybe like a D plus C minus right now, and with some points adjustments, they could actually leapfrog pretty well. The only really other issue I see with them is their ability is okay. Like it's not amazing, but on a 4-up, they do get to fight on death. And really, the only thing I could say is if you just open the door for them to have a homunculus attached to them, that shoots them up even at their current points. That shoots them up way, way up. Like they hit B, possibly A tier at that point. I don't see that happening with the data slate. I think we're just getting points changes. I'm just speculating. But I am telling you right now, the way I see them, they're D tier. I do like to put them on the table, but by and large, I've not been impressed with them. All right, C tier. Oh my goodness, I missed a D tier. Let's talk about that D tier down there. I added it on this one and forgot to add it on the other one. I apologize. So let's go ahead and talk about that D tier I did miss. Okay, so that other D tier unit that I forgot to add in the previous slide, let's talk about that right now. That's actually the Court of the Archon. So the Court of the Archon is a D tier, and here's why. It's a really interesting unit. I would say, like, if you stick it in with just the Archon, because the Archon can attach to the Court of the Archon, you're not getting a lot out of it. And the Archon's better suited for Kabalites. And you can attach it to Kabalites, and that's interesting. It's actually a really interesting interaction. But now we have a really expensive unit. You know, these boys are 85 points. The Archon is however many points he is, plus the Kabalites. Now you can split the Kabalites in half, put 5 of them into a Venom, and then keep the other big squad out and have the Court of the Archon attached to it. But that's just a massive unit that's running around, and it costs a lot of points, and you don't really get that much out of it. You know, it's neat, and I think there's some play there. You know, you can give the whole squad lethal hits. You can give if you shoot a battle or shoot an infantry unit, they have to make a battle shock test. They're -1 to wound while they have the slith. The Urgul gives the whole unit fight first. But again, it's just one of those where, by and large, it's 85 points to give one 5 to 10 man unit of Kabalites a bunch of special abilities. And I don't know that that's worth the 85 points. Maybe it is. You guys tell me. That's why I think they're D tier. So now let's jump into the C tier since I accidentally skipped that last D tier. We're going to start with the Raider. It is, again, I think they're not worth their points. I think they need to be cheaper. I've said this ad nauseum. I know other people have said, nah, I like them. I've had good success with them. And that's fine. And I know some people have done very well competitively with them. I just think they're too many points. 90 points is too many points for something that's T8 with a 4+ save and 10 wounds. We're still paying that fly tax, and that's why it's so many points. It drops maybe 10, 15 points, and we could bump it up to B tier. The next one here is the Void Raven Bomber. And again, I think the Void Raven is actually pretty good. The only reason it's down as low as it is again just because of my personal feelings on aircraft, and it's kind of cool. Like, it's got its once per game bomb, which whatever. That's not why I would take it. The reason I think it looks really solid is because you actually have some good shooting out of it. What you get out of that, this model is equipped with 2 Void Lances, and then you can also equip it with Void Raven missiles, or you can swap the Void Lances with Dark Sides. So let's talk about these guns for a minute. Dark Sides are actually pretty good. You get 2 of them. They're 6 shots each at strength 8, neg 4, 2 damage. So you can throw 12 shots. That's a lot like the Tantalus, right? You're relying on volume shooting at that point rather than low volume and high damage. So you've got this high volume, high AP, low damage shooting, and that's going to be really good into certain targets. Even things that damage reduce, that's going to be good into. That's a solid, because of the amount of dice, that's a solid gun into like Terminators. Yes, you're wounding them on 4s, but it's going to be an invuln for 1 damage with 12 dice. So it's one of those where it's a good choice. Void Lancers are also an excellent choice at strength 14, neg 4, d6 plus 2. So that's going to be one of your few sources of like really, really high strength guns in this army and really high AP. Like, Dark Lancers are good at strength 12, don't get me wrong, and you can bring a lot of them. But man, having strength 14 at 36-inch range, that is just super, super nice. And the fact that you get 2 of them means you're going to have 4 shots. So to me, the Void Raven, really good. The missiles are okay. You get, D3 shots at 923 or D6 shots at 711. You choose the profile. Again, very solid shooting. The only thing that holds them down to me is the fact that they're aircraft. Because even at 195 points, they're not unreasonably priced. They have more wounds than the jet fighter. And, by and large, it's just a better jet to me. After that, we've got Urian, whatever you want to call him. He's gross. I don't like him. Anybody who's named Urine is not my friend. He's not bad. A lot of the homunculus stuff you're going to see in this like C and B tier, and some of it, when you combine, would actually raise it, but as standalone units, not great. Urian does, at the end of the movement phase, he can heal a unit of Chronos, Talos, or Grotesques, or he can revive 3 Racks. So that's actually pretty good. Being able to heal the things that have the feel no pain, get the -1 to wound and stuff is pretty good. And then he revives on a 2+. And really the only reason I wouldn't put him a little higher is just because he doesn't really do anything else. So, a regular homunculus gives a 4-up feel no pain. And to me, that has more utility than reviving 3 Racks. Now, if you have both, obviously, that's even better, but you can't put both in one squad. And then he can only attach to Racks, and again, that also kind of holds him back. And that's the one thing I'm kind of disappointed about in our index, is that we have these cool homunculus units like Grotesques, but we can't put anything in them. But that's him. Other than that, he's pretty much a standard homunculus. He doesn't do anything else that's special. He does have the 4-up invuln instead. And then we've got Hellions, and I've talked about those a little bit, and I'm probably being generous putting them in C tier, but I really like them. I have fun with them. The only reason I say they are in C tier is because of the fact that they have access to advance and charge and they have assault weapons and they move 14 inches. So they have a lot of mobility, much more mobility than a lot of the other units in our army do, and the ability to advance and interact with the game. And that's why, you know, to me, they're C tier. I don't want to see them get a points drop, but I think that's the direction they're going to go. If they drop down to like 80 points, maybe we bump them up to B tier because at least then they're not soaking up 100 for 5 of them. But by and large, you could make a strong case for them to be D. I think they're C. I think at T4 and 2 wounds, they're slightly more durable than a lot of the other units in our index anyway, and that also helps. Then we've got Racks. Man, and for me, Racks by themselves, they're just okay. They don't do anything. 6 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain. They are relatively cheap at 60 points for 5. I still think that's too much, especially when Kabalites went down and Kabalites are super cheap and they are just so much better. But Rex, by and large, if they die or they kill something, you get an extra pain token. But the problem is that they don't really kill anything. Their melee has no AP. Most of their guns are like one shot, so they're not really killing much. And if you're using them to kill units, if you're like going out of your way to get something down to like one wound so that you can kill it with your racks, you're putting way more effort into making their ability work for you, and you're actually just better off throwing a 5-man on an objective and hoping your opponent kills it off to get that extra pain token. And that's just kind of where I'm at with them. Now, the next one over is the homunculus, and I do think the homunculus is C, but again, it's for a lot of the same reasons that Urian's C tier. It's because by himself, he's not that great. He doesn't do anything. But when you put him into a unit of racks, if you were to combine them, I would argue that the combined unit is probably a B tier, especially if you take a 10-man, because now you have 10 wounds with a 4-up feel no pain, and they can be -1 to wound. So it's one of those where they get a lot more resilient when you start layering them. But by themselves, they're both just C tier. Nothing great, nothing to write home about. The one thing that does make Rax stand out is that you can take a 5-man unit without having to take a Venom, which is helpful. So they are a nice, cheap unit you could throw on a back objective with a small footprint, spread them out a little bit, etc. And then the next two in that C tier, again, this is because they're by themselves. Incubi, Drazar. Incubi are okay. The biggest issue is that by themselves, they don't really punch above their weight class. 5 Incubi will kill some Marines, sure, but man, that's about it. They don't really do anything else. And then Drazar is pretty good by himself, but I think when you put them together, you actually bump the whole unit up to A tier because giving the whole unit +1 to wound makes the whole unit hit above their weight class. And with Drazar swing and strength 6, neg 2, 3 damage with +1 to wound, he's wounding most vehicles in the game on 4s. And with dev wounds, like he gets pretty spicy. And then with 30 dice coming out of the rest of the squad, wounding on 5s with hit rerolls, very, very good. Individually, very, very average. Together, very good. So now we're going to jump over to B tier. And the first thing that we have in B tier is going to be the Ravager. I know you can't really see it there, but that's what that is. And the Ravager, it was probably A tier before the points hike it got, but it went up, I think 15 to 20 points. And once that happened, for me personally, it was just like, man, these are really good, but I don't know that they're auto takes now, or at least not 2 of them. Maybe 1. And maybe 2. I don't know. I just think that for what you get out of them, they're just too many points to justify a higher tier. But they're still a great unit. 3 Dark Lances. If you're shooting at something that's not taking any damage, you re-roll your hit rolls of 1. And then the next unit's Mandrakes. And honestly, the only reason Mandrakes aren't A tier is because they don't really do anything. They're an excellent utility unit, very much a one-trick pony used for move blocking early game or scoring mid to late game with their Step into the Shadows ability. But that's it. They're not really a good damage dealer. They don't tank objectives very well. So that's what holds them down. Great unit, a lot of utility. I run a squad of 5 in pretty much every list I use, simply because, man, it's if I go first, I will absolutely charge them into, like, if you're playing Marines and you have a Rhino, I'm gonna charge the Rhino because you're not gonna kill them in melee with the Rhino, and now whatever's in the Rhino is just held back for a turn. And that's, to me, where mandrakes shine. That, or hiding in corners to score you, like cheeky engage or investigate signals, stuff like that. Next B tier unit is going to be Kronos. And man, again, for Kronos, the only thing that holds them back is the same thing that holds back mandrakes. They just don't do any damage. They are an excellent utility unit. You can layer multiple Kronos, if I've read that correctly, but it's one of those, if you spend a pain token on a 4-up, they regenerate a pain token. So if you're burning through them very quickly, they can be very helpful. Like I said, the main reason I've personally not run a ton of them is I've only had a handful of matchups and games where I've really needed something like a Kronos. And a good example is that I played Monster Mash Tyranids, and man, I definitely needed that Kronos. I really did. Like, that was a rough matchup just because everything's T10, T11, T12, 4-up invul in a lot of it. So it's just like, all right, cool, man. I can only throw so many Dark Lances, and if you make your 4-ups, if this is a game where you have hot dice, like, there's nothing I can do. So I think Reavers are also a good B tier unit. Excellent mobility. They do what Hellions do, but better. They get access to the Heat Lances, which I think are very good guns. The only reason they're not A tier is because their melee is poop. Um, you know, so slamming them into a unit doesn't do you any good. And to me, that's what a Witch Cult unit should be for. You should have some sort of melee that makes them worth it, like charging into things. And with them not even having a pip of AP, that's the only reason to me they're not A tier. B tier, and probably very high B tier, just because of their mobility and what they can bring to the table with the 16-inch movement and the heat lance and everything else that they can do. All right, the next B tier unit is Talos, and again, they're awesome. I love them. They are basically Kronos, but they sacrifice a little bit of utility to give you some killing power. And just being ballistic skill 3, and depending on what weapon loadout you have, they're either weapon skill 3 or weapon skill 4. And again, that's the only thing that keeps them from being A tier, is that the melee just can't push them over the edge, and the shooting just can't push them over the edge. If you give them heat lances, you get 2 shots hitting on 4s, and then if somebody's got like LFR, you're going to hit on 5s or pop smoke. And if you take Haywire, you just have a very one-dimensional gun now. And that becomes another issue, but you get twice as many shots. They do have good options. They're really rugged and durable. Again, same -1 to wound strat, 5-up feel no pain. Talos, I've been real high on them since they came out. They, to me, have been one of the best units in the book in terms of just like what they bring to the table. The only thing that really holds them down is that, like I said, they just strength 8 is where they cap at melee, and ballistic skill 4. But they're scary and people don't like them. They look at them and they go, "Oh my gosh, these are silly." After the Talos, we've got the Archon, and really, the only reason the Archon went down is because of the way all of the weird strat interactions changed in the data slate. Vect becomes a less good ability, still a good one, but just a less good one. And that's the main reason you take him, is for his Vect ability, where you can slap a strat with, hey, that costs an additional CP. But outside of that, he'd be an A tier, and arguably still could be. He's just less important now. And again, the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of the characters that we rate, we're also rating them without enhancements. And that's a whole different conversation then. Because giving any character the enhancement where you generate a pain token in your command phase is going to make them more valuable. So next B tier unit we have is the Beastmaster. What a great utility unit. They have a 9-inch scout move, 12-inch move, whole lot of weird stuff going on there, and they're awesome, man. They are a really, really underrated unit. I've had some conversations with you guys in the comments section about them. I have looked at them quite a few times, and I think they're really cool. And again, the big thing is that they just, outside of the utility, they don't do much. You know, you've got some melee, you've got a little bit of utility, but that's about it. The Beastmaster himself, he's got 3 wounds. The Clawed Fiend has 5 wounds. The Chimera has 2 wounds, and then the Razorwing Flock has 3. So you've got a lot of wounds in there. You have a 6-up invuln. So you've got that going for you. And then the Beastmaster, while he's in the unit, you reroll charges for the unit, and they reroll hit rolls of 1 if it's a beast model. Again, they're just a weird, cheeky unit, and it's 1 Beastmaster, 1 Clawed Fiend, 2 Chimera, 3 Razorwing Flocks, and it's 105 points. It's a lot of wounds you actually get. But again, like I said, the only thing that what keeps them from being exceptionally good is just the fact that they don't really hit hard, and while it's a lot of wounds, they're just going to die to bolt gunfire for the most part. The next B tier unit is Lilith. And arguably, you could put Lilith at A tier. And the only reason I didn't is because her by herself, yes, she's very good, but she's still going to die, right? But when you put her with witches, and the whole unit gets fight first, and the whole unit gets +1 strength, and now your witches are strength 4, now we're talking. Now we're getting witches where they should be. Now we've got a good character doing what it's supposed to do. And you put them together, and to me, together, they're A tier. But by themselves, Lilith is B, witches are D. That's just the way it is. She's awesome, though. If you haven't used her, put her in a squad of witches. She is a lot of fun. All right, let's look at the A tier units. We have got Venom, as everybody knows, like that is it. That's the best thing in our index in terms of transports, at least dedicated ones. They're really good. They let you break squads in half. If your Cabalites are in them, they get sticky objectives as well. Their firing deck, their stealth, their 14-inch movement, their deep strike. Like, there isn't really an ability they don't have. And then right next to them are the Cabalites. And again, for a lot of the same reasons. You get the 5 special weapon dudes. You can split the unit up, put the 5 in the transport, or put the 5 on the table and put the splinter rifles in the transports. Doesn't really matter. But you get to break them up like that. They are firing decks, so they are a really good mobile gun platform. And I'm telling you guys, if you haven't done it, the look people give you when you shoot with that tiny little Venom and just keep rolling dice is worth it. The Venoms are awesome. The Cabalites are awesome with their sticky objectives. If the Archon is attached to them, they stay at A tier because they don't really get much from the Archon. They just reroll wound rolls of 1 and then reroll wound rolls if they're empowered. So by and large, the Archon doesn't do a whole heck of a lot for them, but you don't want him just standing out in the middle of nowhere doing nothing. And then that one right next to it is actually a Tantalus. What an excellent, excellent unit that is. What a great, great transport that is. I have had a lot of fun with mine. It is, I think, the highest toughness in our index at T10. I think that is it. T10, 16-inch move, 4-up save, 5-up invuln. It is 18 wounds, so it's actually one of the most durable things in our index. Its guns are assault. It gets 12 shots at strength 10, neg 2 damage. It used to just have 2 guns that get 6 shots each, and now it just has 1 gun that gets 12. Is kind of the interaction. Its ability is basically ramming speed. If you charge, you roll a d6, and on a 2 to 3, you do some mortal wounds. On a 4 to 5, you do some more mortal wounds, and on a 6, you do some more mortal wounds. So its ability is kind of meh, but even its melee is actually solid, especially when you consider how bad our melee got on our boats. It gets 6 attacks at 812. It does hit on 4s, but it's pretty good. And then firing dex 16 and deep strike is just the bee's knees. It's hilarious. It transports 16. It's firing dex 16, and it's 230 points. So it's not much more than 2 raiders. So it's one of those, like, if you haven't had a chance to play with one, do it. It's so much fun. I've run it with I've taken 3 Cabalite squads, put them in Venoms, and then put all of the heavy weapons in the Tantalus. And so, like, that Tantalus will shoot 9 splinter cannon shots, 3 dark lances, 3 blasters, 3d6 shredders. Like, it is just so many dice, and it's so funny. And that's why I feel like it's an A. It's actually one of the more durable units you have. It's got a lot of movement. It can melee. It can shoot. You can put dudes in it. It can deep strike. So again, there's not much it doesn't do. Its guns are assault, so it can advance. It can advance and shoot, and then fire and fade. So you can do a lot of things with it. There's a lot of utility there. Okay, so now we have our one S tier unit, and that's Scourges. And that is probably not a shock to anybody. With a 14-inch movement, a built-in 6-inch fire and fade, they can fire and fade with the strat. It all stacks. You can get heat lances and a couple other assault weapons on them. Dark lances are really good. You just have a lot of options there. And there's nothing, again, that they really don't do. With having 14 inches and can move or move, shoot, move, they can cover a lot of ground. You can do some cheeky objective stealing with them. You can hide them in a corner, pop them out, shoot, and then bounce them back. Depending on what guns you give them, they can take haywire, which is 2 shots each. So again, they've just got so much going for them. They're relatively cheap. And then once you get them, and if you can camp them next to like a Chronos, you can just keep trying to juice them up every turn with your pain tokens. And then hopefully you're getting some back. If you can kill units, you can get more back. So to me, Scourges are S tier. And then as we wrap this up, there's one unit that I realized I didn't put on here, and I'm sure you all have figured it out by now. It was not intentional. And that was the Succubus, the Plain Jane Succubus. And she actually goes down in D tier because, again, by herself, she's not very good. She doesn't bring much to the table. She does give witches sustained hits. And arguably, if you put her in with witches, maybe those two combined jump to C or B tier. I like them. I run them. I think it's a lot of fun. It's probably not the most efficient use of my points, but if we're being realistic and honest, they're probably, when combined, maybe C tier. And really, the Succubus doesn't really get good until you give her enhancement, which is 20 points for whatever reason. And all it does is give her an extra attack. And then if you juice her up, she gets another extra attack. So she goes from, 6 attacks to 8 attacks. So it's one of those, by herself, she's not great. She didn't do anything. With a unit, she doesn't really bring much to the table other than can give the unit fight first, and then the sustained hits on the witches. But again, when you compare her to Lilith, Lilith is just better, making the witches strength 4 makes them a lot more versatile. And, because now we're wounding strength 6 and strength 7 on 5s instead of 6s. So it's one of those where it's just a better interaction going that route. That's the tier list. This is probably a longer video, and I apologize for that. But man, what a good time that was. I had a lot of fun making it. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Make sure you're talking in the comments. Let me know what you would change, how you think your tier list would look differently than mine. I'm definitely open to hearing it. Like I said, it is a big matter of opinion for a lot of things, especially that middle chunk to me, because a lot of those could slide up or down depending on your play style and how you use them, and just being able to implement different strategies with different units. So that's going to wrap it up. Give a shout out to our immortals. Captain Too Tall, the real Donnie G, and Lord Wellingstone, and Daniel Bodecker. Again, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you. And then there's some links on the screen. I will put those links in the comments. And that's it. Thanks for listening.